Hello my juicy peaches, welcome back to my channel. It is your priestess Peaches here, supporting you to live your juiciest life and co-create a heavenly world. And as you can see by the title, today's video is going to be about Marc Gafni, or is it Gafni? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I'm going to say Gafni. I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. And but it's not just about Marc. This video is going to be about my broader mission and the wider topics at hand here to do with SA, CSA, sexual trauma, and predatory behaviour and abuse of power. So I think I came across Marc Gafni for the first time a couple of years ago on a podcast type video. I'm not 100% sure if it was him, but I sort of recognised him when I saw him in the Aubrey episode. And obviously that is why I'm speaking about Marc Gafni today. I wanted to know, who is this man that Aubrey and Vylana have been seeking support from, who have been taking relationship advice from, about their divine union, about their sexual selves. And I just wanted to know, who is this guy and why are they listening to him? And I have to say that when I was watching that episode with Aubrey and Vylana and Alana and Marc, I did get some strange feelings within my body. Alarm bells were going off. I was feeling this contraction. I was feeling this kind of slippery energy, this creepy sort of under my skin type energy when I was listening to Marc Gafni. And so I decided to go on a little bit of a deep dive into him and his credentials, who he is, his past, and I just wanted to establish, who is this man and why are they taking advice from him. And I want to have a really nuanced and open conversation about the topics that this has brought up for me personally, and like I said, the wider topics within society that I feel are important to address. And I just want to say, I am actually creating a video series called Healing CSA, and I'm going to share some information from that video series that I've been creating, which I don't know, this has kind of prompted me to put that series out there. It's just very challenging and very triggering for me due to my own past with sexual trauma, and so it's just a very vulnerable thing for me to put out there, but I feel like it would be really useful for a lot of people, and so I'm definitely contemplating whether now would be the time to release these videos and finalize them and create them. So let me know in the comments after you've listened to this video if you think I should put this video series out there about Healing CSA. Okay, so let's get into this video about Marc Gafni and the wider topics that it brings up. And I just want to let you know, I am going to be looking down at my notes sometimes because I don't want to forget anything that I have written here, and I have a tendency to go off on tangents and waffle if I'm not careful, so please bear with me, and I hope that's okay for me to be looking at my notes. So who is Marc Gafni? So Marc Gafni is a former Orthodox rabbi and a spiritual teacher and leader. He became a controversial figure in the Jewish renewal movement, and he later pivoted to spiritual philosophy, co-founding the Center for Integral Wisdom and more recently the Eros Mystery School. And he positions himself as a spiritual teacher on love, sexuality, human evolution, and he often uses language like outrageous love and cosmo-erotic humanism. The more that I read, the more that I watched, the more that I listened to about Marc Gafni, the more concerned I became. I want to share with you a bit about his past because there are a lot of allegations and complaints against him, and he's also had 2 misdemeanors when it comes to being sexually inappropriate with teenage girls. And I just want to say that I compiled all of this information from the Dr. Phil episode that's available on YouTube, the New York Times, the Forward, the Tablet magazine, and also first-person accounts. So I'm going to just give you a summary of the things that have happened, and then I'm going to be going into a bit more detail about the huge red flags and things that I saw when researching about this. So the first incident happened in the 1980s, the early 1980s, and a woman, then girl, called Sarah Kabakov. I may be pronouncing that wrong, sorry if so. And Sarah says that she was groomed and sexually abused repeatedly by Marc Gafni when he was 19 or 20, and when she was 13 or 14, and he was staying in her family home. He was going to college nearby, and he asked to stay in Sarah's family home so that he could be closer to college. But she says that it was a way for him to groom her parents and to get into her bedroom at night. Gafni admits on the Dr. Phil episode to having a romantic and sexual relationship with Sarah, but he claims that it was consensual and that he never touched below the waist. And he has never denied the relationship happened. He's never denied that he was sexual with her, but he denies its characterization as abusive. He says that they were teenagers in love and that he can still access those loving feelings for her to this day. The second incident was Judy Mitzner. She is a woman, then girl. She was 16 at the time. Again, this was in the 80s, and Marc Gafni was 24 at the time, and he was also her mentor and campus leader. And Judy Mitzner was staying at Marc Gafni's and his wife's house. She was having troubles in her family home, and they took her in and she was staying with them. And she says that she saw Marc Gafni and his wife more as parental figures, and she describes the encounter as sexually abusive when he kissed and touched her and forced her to touch him. She describes it as deeply violating. He describes it as necking and a sexual incident that shouldn't have happened because he was her campus leader and mentor. He doesn't mention that it shouldn't have happened because she was 16, and he doesn't mention that it shouldn't have happened because he had a wife at the time, or that this 16-year-old was staying in his family home with him and his wife. He just says it's wrong because he was in a position of authority. So then when he was teaching in this community, multiple women came forward to say that he had been sexually inappropriate with them and manipulative, and that he was in relationships with multiple women but didn't let them know about each other, and that he had been abusing his position as of authority again. There's also Marc Gafni's ex-wife in the early 2000s, Talia Gafni, and she accused him of emotional abuse, manipulative behaviour and ongoing infidelity, including sleeping with multiple women without their knowledge of one another, and she has supported other women who have spoken out about him. Then there's over 20 other individuals between 2006-2016, reports of sexual misconduct, boundary violations, psychological manipulation, and professional gaslighting or retaliation after questioning him. And this includes students, colleagues, and former staff. Some have said that he used spiritual teachings to justify sexually abusive behaviours or to silence and confuse them afterwards. These include public testimonies, community letters, and group withdrawals from his projects, but there were no police reports. And it also includes a 2006 open letter from nearly a dozen rabbis and Jewish leaders condemning his behaviour. And there was also a change.org petition that over 100 different rabbis, spiritual leaders, and people of the community signed to get him out of there. He received 2 misdemeanors for the teenage girls, the 13 or 14-year-old called Sarah and the 16-year-old called Judy. So Marc Gafni appeared on Dr. Phil in 2016 to defend himself after multiple survivors' stories were published. He frames all these accusations as a smear campaign against him. He initially claimed that these accounts were completely false, including the accounts from Sarah. He says it's completely false, it didn't happen, whilst in the same breath he acknowledges that he was sexual with her, but that he thought it was a consensual, mutual, loving, romantic relationship. And he also minimises her account by saying that he never touched below the waist. His version of events is a very, very different story to the account written by Sarah herself. She has written two open accounts that are available online to view, and she says that she is not trying to create a smear campaign. She has absolutely no reason to do that. And that it's been difficult for her to speak out. On the Dr. Phil episode, they interviewed Judy, the then 16-year-old girl, now a woman, and she shares her accounts by saying that he got on top of her, he forced her to touch him, and that things escalated very quickly. Whereas he says that she was asking for sex and she was asking him to leave his wife. He seems to only acknowledge that the wrongdoing was because he was her campus leader and mentor. He doesn't mention that it was wrong in and of itself, and he doesn't mention that cheating on his wife with a 16-year-old girl inside their family home was wrong. So I have to share about something right now because I think it's important to have the correct terminology for these things, because I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say on this channel, but I'm just going to say the words. If this video gets cancelled, then I will have to re-edit it and bleep the words out, but I'm just going to say all the words as they are. The term paedophile gets misused, and I want to clarify what a paedophile is and also just share a bit about it. So, a paedophile is somebody who is sexually attracted to pre-pubescent children, and they are usually aged 13 and below. It is an attraction to pre-pubescent children, children who have not yet gone through puberty. And there must be at least a 6-year age gap. Marc Gafni is adamant that Sarah Kabakov was 14 when they started being intimate, not 13, and that he was 19. So it's right on the cusp here of paedophilia. But there's another term that comes into play here that I want to share with you. An attraction to children who are going through puberty is called hebephilia or hebephilia. And somebody who is attracted to pubescent children is a hebephile or hebephile. And then somebody who is attracted to older teenagers who are not yet adults as such is a phebophilia, So there's pedophile, paedophile, hebephile, hebephile, and then a phebophile. And I just want to say, not all paedophiles, hebephiles, or ephebophiles are child sex offenders. But it has to be said that if somebody does have an attraction to children and teenagers, then there is a higher likelihood that they will offend than somebody who isn't. On the Dr. Phil episode, in the comments section, there was a few people saying that it's not that bad because they're both teenagers. He was only 19, she was 14. She could have been a mature 14-year-old and him a young 19-year-old. Females develop sooner and quicker than males, and so it's not that bad. I feel like it's really important for me to speak about this because a lot of people don't understand that a 14-year-old cannot consent, and they are below the legal age of consent. They are a child, they are a minor, and a 19-year-old in the UK is considered an adult. And when you turn 18, you're considered an adult. And I know some places in America, you're considered an adult when you turn 21, and there can be blurred lines around these things, and there's people who are in age gap relationships where it really does work. There are people who are genuinely old souls and who get on better with older people. I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about predatory behavior. I'm speaking about sexually abusive behavior. And I'm speaking about children and the age of consent. I want to share with you a few slides from my Healing CSA series. So, just on consent. Consent is not just about saying yes, it requires the capacity to understand what's being agreed to. Children cannot legally or emotionally consent to sexual activity. Their brains, their boundaries and emotional systems are still developing. Even if a child appears to participate, this is still not consent. Children cannot consent. In most countries, the age of consent ranges from 16 to 18, depending on local laws. Some places allow it as low as 14 in specific contexts, but this doesn't make it ethical or safe. The age of consent laws exist to protect minors from manipulation, grooming, and abuse of power. The younger the person, the more vulnerable they are to being exploited. The age of consent is the age at which a person can legally consent to sexual activity, including sexual intercourse. Ages of consent differ from country to country and area to area. In the UK, it is 16. In some places, it is 18. And in some, it's even as young as 14, like I said. The age of consent seems to be mostly based on physicality and puberty, when a person can definitely reproduce. A minor is someone who is still legally a child and under the age of 18. In the UK, a minor is not necessarily under the age of legal consent. The brain does not fully develop, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, until around age 25 years old. Perhaps this needs to be taken into consideration too here. The age of consent doesn't take into account someone's mental, emotional, or sexual maturity and life experience. The age of consent is appropriate when people of similar legal ages are interacting sexually, exploring and discovering their sexual selves, but when someone much older interacts with someone much younger, especially someone who is not an adult, this is problematic for many reasons. People who are under the age of legal consent are children, and children cannot consent. They do not have the mental, emotional, or sexual maturity or life experience to be able to consent. They do not understand sex at all, or they do not fully understand depending on their age. They do not have awareness of the impact of these interactions on the body, psyche, and emotions yet. Sex is not a conscious consensual choice for a child, as they do not have the level of awareness and comprehension required to consent. Therefore, they cannot consent. When someone much older is sexually pursuing someone who is not yet an adult and/or who is under the age of legal consent, a minor, there is not an equal level of awareness. There are not truly equal intentions and desires or equal understanding. This therefore creates a vulnerability for the younger person or child. Also, and this applies to adults too, if you have to manipulate in any way, if you have to coerce, groom, or persuade or force, what you receive is not consent. What you have done is taken advantage of someone and abused them. So there are differing intentions and desires between children and child sex offenders or child predators. So a child, including teenagers, may be seeking approval, acceptance, praise, reward, and non-romantic love. Saying yes to sex may come from fear, compliance, or their innocent curiosity. And child sex predators and offenders, they are often seeking romantic love, sexual gratification, and romantic companionship, or to have power over the victim. They can mistake a child's innocent and natural curiosity for connection or compliance as the same desire, attraction, and romantic interest as their own, when it's not. Even if the child or minor says that they have the same intentions and desires as the offender, the fact remains that they do not fully understand what they are saying yes to or what they are doing, as they do not have the full level of awareness and experience required to consent. They cannot consent. Even if a child believes what is happening is okay, the evidence clearly states that they still suffer physical, psychological, emotional and/or sexual issues at the time or later in life. They often have developmental issues, immune systems are underdeveloped, they end up with intimacy, relationship, trust, health and reproductive issues, as well as mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, social phobia, PTSD, suicidal ideation, personality disorders and identity issues, and also issues with healthy sexual development. So an adult who continues to be attracted to pubescent children, children going through puberty, is a hebophile or hebophile. So Mark was 19 when Sarah was, let's say, 14. That is on the cusp of paedophilia, but we could call that hebophilia. Mark was 24 when he had sexual relations with the 16-year-old. This again is not paedophilia, this is hebophilia or hebophilia. So I had a read of Marc Gafni's website, Who is Marc Gafni? And it goes into detail. These are open letters, and that Marc Gafni has written, and other people have shared their opinion just about the allegations, complaints, and misdemeanors. And one of the things I found interesting that was brought up, which I do feel like is an issue and is an ongoing issue when it comes to religion and religious beliefs, because it's very typical when you are suppressing your sexuality because of religious beliefs, and when you are not allowing yourself to be sexually expressed in empowered ways, that this suppression can create a hypersexuality, which then gets acted out in not very beneficial ways and often abusive ways. But this was spoken about in terms of have sympathy for Marc Gafni. He was only 19. He was trying to suppress his sexuality. He fell in love with Sarah, and he thought it was a consensual, mutual loving relationship, which is a very, very different story to Sarah's account of these events. She says that he would come into her room at night and force himself on her, and she would repeatedly say no, yet he wouldn't stop. I do think that this is an important topic to speak about, because a lot of religions will shame sexuality, and people have to repress their sexuality. They don't have healthy outlets for it. They're not allowed to even experiment or explore their sexual selves. And so this sexual energy is contained within them. And when you are at a young age and you're developing and your hormones are going off, then if you don't have a healthy way or an empowered way to express your sexuality, it can become perverted and twisted and hypersexual within somebody. That can really cause unfortunate situations to occur. And I think that that is a valid point. I don't know the truth of what went on, but I will say that there is usually no smoke without fire. And I don't see why Sarah, it's a very difficult thing to speak about sexual abuse that you have endured. It is not easy to go public with something like that. And she's got nothing to gain by doing that. Do you know what I mean? There's no motive for her to be trying to have a smear campaign against Marc Gafni. I really don't think it's that. But like I said, I want to have a nuanced conversation about this. And so I do think it's important to bring up the topic about religious sexual suppression, repression, shaming, because that can cause issues. So I want to speak about hebephilia or hebephilia, which is an attraction to teenagers. And a lot of men will say that they have an involuntary sexual attraction to teenage girls, and it is the evolutionary psychology perspective that it is because of fertility cues. And if you look in nature with animals, as soon as an animal is able to reproduce, they start reproducing, right? And so evolutionary psychology says the same thing about humans, that unfortunately for many men, they do have an involuntary arousal response and sexual attraction to teenage girls who are because of fertility cues. There is a lot of evidence and science and psychology that counters the evolutionary psychology perspective, saying that that's not actually true. And if you want to look into all of that, then you can. I'm not going to go into all of the research I've done into that in this video, but there is extensive research either side of things. There's also the take on it around how a lot of males can witness pornography or graphic pornography at a young age, and this can impact their sexual development, or even if they have had been taken advantage of themselves at a younger age, that can also impact their attraction cues and condition them to be attracted to teenagers, and this can affect their sexual development into adulthood. My point about this is, if a man has involuntary sexual attraction to teenage girls, it's really, really important for him to become sexually masterful and to not act on those primal urges, because there is a huge risk of harm. And like I said, there is a power dynamic, there is a vulnerability in the younger person. Even though teenagers can appear mature, both physically, mentally, emotionally. They can seem mature. You have to understand that they are still developing. They are still developing physically, emotionally, developmentally, neurologically, psychologically, on all the levels. They are not yet fully developed. They are not as mature as they seem or that you think they are. Sexual mastery requires maturity, not indulgence. It's really important not to become predatory. It's really important to not pursue a sexual relationship with somebody much, much younger than you that is still a child. Even if you think that they are grown up, even if you think that they are mature for their age, even if you think that they want it too, it's really important to understand the dynamics at play. It's really important to understand their vulnerability and to step into your protective nature as a man rather than your pursuing nature as a man. You need to see teenage girls as if they are your daughter. So I just want to touch on something that can happen to victims and survivors, and that is something called arousal discordance. And I'm saying this for both potential perpetrators, but also for victims and survivors. So I'm going to share a few slides here again. Arousal discordance is when there is a discordance with your arousal. There's a misalignment. There is a misalignment between attraction, desire, turn on, and your genital arousal responses. So attraction, desire, turn on, and your genital responses are all completely separate of each other. And arousal discordance is when your attraction, desire, turn on, and genital arousal responses are out of alignment. One way this can happen is if you are seriously turned on in a consensual adult relationship and that you are wanting to have sex, you feel turned on, you desire it, you're attracted to your partner, but your genitals are not responding. Perhaps if you're a man, you may not be getting an erection. If you're a woman, you may not be lubricated. And this is a form of arousal discordance. So that is one way of looking at arousal discordance, but it can happen the opposite way as well. So when somebody is being physically stimulated, they can start experiencing arousal responses, genital responses, even pleasure and orgasm. That does not mean that the victim was attracted to their abuser. It does not mean that they desired it. It does not mean that they were turned on and enjoying it. And it definitely does not mean that they consented to it. So attraction, desire, turn on, and your genital responses are all completely separate of each other. Arousal discordance is when your attraction, desire, turn on, and genital arousal responses are out of alignment. Arousal is not always as it seems. Arousal is not always attraction. Arousal is not always turn on or enjoyment. Arousal is not always desire, and arousal is not consent. And a lot of perpetrators will try to justify their actions because of the arousal responses happening within their victims. They try to justify it and they believe that the person enjoyed it or wanted it, and they will delude themselves and tell themselves that because of the arousal responses that can happen when somebody is being stimulated even against their will. So in 2025, we now have years and years and years of studies, science, evidence, bodies of work that we can clearly see now that when somebody older is pursuing somebody much younger, a child, or somebody who is under the age of legal consent, that there are awful ramifications for that and consequences for that for the young person, for the child. And we can clearly see that in later life, when they have processed what's happened, it can negatively impact them throughout their whole lives. We can see that. We have the evidence that is 100% accurate. And for most people, that is the case. So there is a huge risk of harm. And so people need to become masterful of their eros, masterful of their sexual energy, and learn how to utilize that energy in positive ways and learn how to shift from pursuing to protecting when it comes to men and young girls. But this works either way, either which way. But I'm speaking about men with teenage girls because that's what's come up around Marc Gafni, right? So in the Dr. Phil episode, Marc Gafni speaks about these women that came forward within the community to complain about him. And at first he says there were no complaints. But then he says that these complaints never went to the police, even though it was implied to him that they had gone to the police, which is why he left the country at the time. But he initially says there were no complaints. But then he is calling them false complaints because he is saying, well, they never went to the police and so they are completely false. This is also a really important topic in society because, yes, sometimes there can be false complaints, and that is a real issue. Sometimes there can be false complaints. But when there is multiple women coming forward and there is a history of girls coming forward now as women, then you have to question, were these completely false complaints? I think it's important to discuss how challenging it is for a victim to come forward and bring their story to the authorities. It can take years to process abuse. It can take a really long time to even understand what has happened. It can take time to get the courage to heal within yourself, to share it even with your closest loved ones. There can be a lot of shame and self-blame that can come up, that can take years to process, let alone going to the authorities about it. When you hear stories of people going to the authorities and not being believed, and also things being twisted onto them and the victims getting in trouble. And so it's really important to have this conversation because yes, there can be false complaints, but often it's not false complaints. It's true complaints, but the victims are too scared to go to the authorities, or they haven't processed things within themselves, or they're just coming together to realize, hang on, this happened to me as well. And when there's multiple victims involved. Also, it could be that the complaints aren't a legal complaint. It's nothing that the police could actually do about that complaint. And so there's no point going to the police or the authorities. But that doesn't invalidate the complaint altogether. That doesn't mean that it is a false complaint. So Marc Gafni says that all these women are making false complaints, that it's not true, it's completely untrue. And because they didn't go to the police, that proves that these complaints aren't true. And I don't know. I don't know if those complaints are true or not. I don't know. Only Marc Gafni and the women involved know what is true and what isn't true. But I do think there's no smoke without fire again. From everything I've researched about him, I get the sense that Marc Gafni is a master manipulator. I want to share with you that I came across his videos about the Me Too movement. I thought it'd be quite interesting to hear what he has to say. While some of his points about the nuances of things did resonate with me, they appear self-serving and they minimise the purpose of Me Too. So he warns against false complaints. Sound familiar? He implies that many complaints are exaggerated or dishonest, especially if they're not reported to the authorities. And like I said before, this is echoing his own situation, and this is not having any compassion or understanding for victims. This is dismissing victims and true complaints, or complaints that aren't enough to go to the authorities, right? He suggests that society is shaming men for their sexual desire. He believes that male erotic desire is demonized in our culture and needs to be spiritually reclaimed and celebrated. So I'm just going to share with you my reflections. So whilst I agree that we need to explore the roots of sexual issues and create a culture that honors healthy eroticism without shame, I feel that Marc Gafni was completely missing the point of Me Too. Me Too is not about shaming healthy masculinity or healthy masculine sexual desire. It is about calling out abuse, especially when power is abused and consent is therefore violated. I have to say, I was disturbed how he uses spiritual language and abstract jargon to muddy the waters, and how he sprinkles in and weaves in some truth within this deeper manipulation. And I have noticed classic manipulation tactics with him, where he bypasses, he gaslights, he convolutes things, he's dismissive about other things. The way that he speaks, he creates this kind of spiritual superiority, and he twists language to protect himself and for his own narrative. I have to say that I strongly sense that his current teachings are a way to absolve himself or rewrite the narrative of his past behavior. And I've noticed a pattern of him positioning himself into spiritual communities and slowly influencing the conversation around sexuality, love, relationships, divine union, the masculine and feminine. But it's in ways that blur boundaries and deflect accountability and that misrepresent everything. So even though some of what he says seems insightful, it seems progressive, it seems enlightened, it seems evolved, I definitely picked up on something unhealed and something troubled within Marc Gafni, something dark. I question if he has changed. I question if he has genuine remorse. I question if he even understands the position that he has put girls and women in and other people. I question if he knows that he has been abusive here. I question if he understands the age of consent. I question these things because it seems like he does not get it, and that he feels justified in his actions, and that he is trying to, it's almost like he's acting out this wound within the work he's doing now, and that everything echoes his past. And I'm wondering if I'm the only one that can see that, or if there's other people out there that can see that he is acting out from wounding, that he is unhealed, he is troubled, that there is this disempowered sexual energy within him, that he is not sexually masterful, and that this is leaking out into the work that he is doing, and that it's even come up with Aubrey, Vylana and Alana. I feel like it's a destructive force, and that it would be dangerous to let this man into your life, into your relationship, into your divine union, into your love, into your sexual self, your sexuality, your sex life, because he is unhealed and he has work to do on himself, because he definitely can't see the errors of his ways. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if Marc Gafni will be able to see the errors of his ways, or if he will have genuine remorse or genuine understanding, because based on all the things that I've researched, watching videos of his, seeing how he's responded on the Dr. Phil episode, his website, everything, what I can see is that he doesn't have true empathy and doesn't have true remorse. And this is indicative of people who have sociopathic tendencies. Unfortunately, many people who have sociopathic tendencies and abuse their positions of power, or are manipulative, or sexually abusive, they aren't able to heal, unfortunately. And I don't like saying that, because I truly believe that healing can happen. Healing can happen for everyone, and that miracles do exist. And, you know, with the right support, I believe that someone can reform, or at least manage themselves. But unfortunately, I'm not sure whether Marc Gafni will be able to have that level of awareness and consciousness to be able to heal, or whether he'd even want to. So bringing this back to the Aubrey, Marcus, Vylana and Alana situation, Marc Gafni appears in Aubrey and Vylana's video on radical monogamy, which is just polyamory, again twisting language to suit his narrative. And he was serving as their relationship guide, their mentor, their guru, the doctor, right? Somebody who is positioned as somebody to listen to. And I feel like his influence has likely shaped how they frame their dynamic, and that he has been planting seeds and working with them and really getting a kick out of it. Yeah, and I feel like Marc Gafni's unhealed wounds are playing out right here before our eyes with Aubrey, Vylana and Alana. You can just see echoes of the dynamic, right? He uses poetic language and spiritual ideas to justify imbalances, to lead to confusion, to bypass, to gaslight. It's all the same again. And I personally find it disturbing that someone with his background has this platform and seems to be able to wriggle his way in and get to the top of spiritual communities again and again, and influence but then it seems to always come crashing down because the people within those communities realize the truth of his wounding. So his current work right now is the Eros Mystery School that is co-led with Aubrey and Vylana. He teaches about outrageous love, your unique self, and the soulmate to wholemate relationships. This aims to shift participants into deeper states of sexual, emotional, and spiritual connection. And on the surface, it really does seem open-hearted, it seems progressive, it seems evolved, it seems enlightened, it seems insightful, and it seems like an inquiry into true honesty. But it's not true honesty because it is laced in distortion and deception. So his work around outrageous love, he says it's not about being reckless per se, but Marc Gafni frames it as love that transcends traditional frameworks and traditional moral frameworks, which is all well and good on the surface, but what kind of morals are we speaking about here? This framing is concerning when it comes from someone with a history of multiple sexual abuse claims, 2 misdemeanors for teenage girls, confessed inappropriate sexual relations with these teenage girls, infidelity, and abuse of power and blurred boundaries again and again and again. Then we have his cosmo-erotic humanism. This is his philosophical vision integrating science, spirituality, desire, and human evolution. And whilst it sounds noble on paper, it's being taught by someone who has never publicly fully taken true responsibility for the harm that they have caused. And that really matters. I feel like that really matters. So like I said, I felt like something was really off from the start watching that episode on Aubrey Marcus's channel. It really felt like Marc Gafni's presence was a shadow. Like I saw him as this kind of sneaky puppet master, this kind of Joker energy, this kind of villain energy, wolf in sheep's clothing, this creepy, devilish energy within him. I could really strongly sense that. And being a survivor myself, I can sense predatory energy. I can sense when someone is misaligned in their sexual selves. And I honestly sense that he is getting a real kick out of Aubrey and Vylana and Alana buying the snake oil he is selling them. I feel like he is getting a kick out of kind of helping orchestrate this. And I could see these 2 men with these huge grins on their faces, and it felt like, is this a joke? Because these 2 are jokers, these big grins, Cheshire cat grins on their faces, whilst Vylana is crying her eyes out and trying to bypass her truth and this kind of forced joy. And Alana is representing kind of innocence and, like Aubrey says, purity. And I know she is an adult, she is a 28-year-old woman, and I'm not trying to say that she's a child or a girl or infantilize her, but you have to admit there are echoes of Marc Gafni's past playing out in this dynamic between Aubrey, Vylana and Alana, and that he was loving it. He was so elated. He was so excited by it all. And so was Aubrey. Whilst the 2 women, different vibe. And if you want to listen to my thoughts about that, you can watch my previous video about it. I really strongly sense that Marc Gafni has some deep wounding around the feminine, and that he subconsciously seeks to have power over the feminine and to disempower the feminine, to gain power for himself, to feel powerful and empowered within himself. But he is not powerful. He will not receive empowerment, true empowerment, through that approach. And I really think he does have wounding around the feminine, hence his advice, hence all his work that he's doing, and hence his past as well. And there's always a pattern of justification with Marc Gafni. Like in the Dr. Phil episode, he focuses mostly on his own pain and his own victimhood of this smear campaign. Like, oh, they're all doing it to me, they're all against me, poor me. Rather than the harm his behaviour has clearly caused others, rather than taking note and learning and healing and taking that on board and recognizing and acknowledging the pain that he has caused others, like seriously acknowledging that and taking ownership of that and being accountable for that. I don't see that happening with him. There's lots of things I haven't mentioned here. For instance, he was called out by a fellow rabbi back in the day. A colleague came to him and basically shared with him that he was not happy with him about his past and about what he was doing to women in the community. And Marc Gafni ended up promoting this man to a higher position within the community. And he claims that it was like an olive branch, it was to create peace. But I question, why would you promote somebody who has attacked you, as Marc Gafni puts it? Why would you then promote them into a higher position? To me, that sounds like keeping your enemies close and trying to silence them, because how can he speak out against you when you've just promoted him? It puts him in a difficult position. That's just one other example of the things that have come up. So yeah, like I said, he often uses spiritual and philosophical language to explain or justify his actions. And you have to be so careful with people like this, okay? Because the things that he says seem profound. The things that he says seem like truth. They seem like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? But that's because he uses subtle and not so subtle manipulation tactics, and he weaves in elements of truth to get people hooked. And his approach, people like that are very charismatic. They speak with a lot of conviction and a lot of confidence, and it gets people sucked in and it gets people hooked. It's a very clever, long form of manipulation, and over time it causes people to doubt themselves. It causes people to doubt their boundaries, to doubt their truth. It can cause people to feel inferior and less enlightened if they don't join in or if they don't get it. But it is all masked under love, light, expansion, and evolution. What I'm questioning is, did Aubrey and Vailana actually know about Marc Gafni's past? If they've seen that Dr. Phil episode, I do not understand how anybody could trust him. Like the way that he was speaking, the way he was saying this is completely untrue. Oh no, that little bit's true. Oh, actually, yeah, I did do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's this real slippery, creepy energy about him. I know he's a master manipulator, and so I am aware that people can get sucked in. This is supposed to be a highly conscious spiritual power couple that has been sucked into Marc Gafni and his teachings. And maybe I've got this all wrong. I may have all of this wrong. I may be completely wrong here. But I don't think I am. And I do trust my body's guidance, because my body knows the score. And due to being a survivor myself, like I said, I can pick up on these vibes. If Aubrey and Vailana did know about Marc Gafni's past, why are they allowing him into their divine union and their relationship? And I wonder why Vailana is putting up with allowing him to advise her husband, and I'm wondering why her husband is allowing this man into their relationship when he has this really shady past. And like I said, there usually isn't smoke without fire, right? I'm not about not having compassion or forgiveness with people, but I think when it's clear somebody hasn't actually acknowledged the harm that they've caused, then you can tell that they haven't healed, they haven't progressed, they haven't evolved, and they are still acting from that wounded space. And so you have to be really, really careful in that situation. And I do just wonder then, why would Vailana and Alana want Aubrey Marcus to be the father of their precious children when he has allowed somebody like Marc Gafni, who has 2 misdemeanors when it comes to sexually inappropriate behavior with teenage girls and inappropriate behavior with students, when he is an adult later on in life, and infidelity with his wives, and you know, more stories coming out about him throughout his whole adult life. Why would they want him to be involved, and why would they then want to have children with Aubrey when Aubrey has allowed this man to infiltrate their relationship? You know, this really isn't about cancelling anybody. It's just about awareness and accountability. And I hope that you've received some value by watching this video. I hope that my slides and information around consent and power dynamics and vulnerability and CSA, abuse of power, and the complexities of being a victim and arousal discordance, I hope that that was beneficial and useful and of value to you. I hope that this doesn't come across as just like a drama type video. I really wanted to bring awareness to this conversation and open up the conversation about these things, because I feel like it's really important to discuss all of these things. I do also think it's important to say that when harm is repeatedly voiced and not truly ever acknowledged, then we do have to take notice of that, and we do have to be careful with people like that. And spiritual teachings, poetic language should never be used to blur lines or to bypass truth, to bypass boundaries. And healing requires truth, and truth requires courage. And even though Marc Gafni is speaking about truth and total radical honesty and radical truth, actually everything is laced in deception, distortion, him not acknowledging things, not understanding things fully. And so I don't see what he's saying to be true. And I don't claim to know the full truth. I don't know Marc Gafni. I don't know Aubrey and Vailana. I don't know the women, the girls from his past, the women from his past. I don't know the rabbis. I don't know the spiritual communities. I don't know. I'm just basing this off the research that I've done, the things that I've read, my own intuitive gut feelings, my body responses, and what I know to be true about the topics this has brought up. It's no longer just about polyamory, limerence, expanding love. It is about influence, it is about power dynamics, it is about distortion, and it is about predatory behavior, taking advantage, and sexual abuse as well. If you have got to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching and listening to me and being here. And if you have got to the end, please drop me a little heart emoji. And yes, I do my hearts like this because I'm not Gen Z. I think I am a millennial. Is that what I am? Boomer? Who knows? 42 this year. What does that make me? But drop me a little heart emoji in the comment section, and feel free to like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, and also subscribe to my channel if you found this useful or if you just enjoyed listening to me today. Please let me know in the comments your thoughts about the things that I shared. And also, just if you do leave a comment, please know that this is a really difficult topic. These are difficult topics to speak about, so please do have kindness and compassion and care with your comments and consideration for me as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go now. Thank you so much for watching. I am wishing you an amazing day, and as always, remember to keep it juicy. Bye.